Page 3? Yes. Sybil Trelawney's prediction. So, like I said, a couple things about Prisoner of Azkaban. Maybe 30 minutes max. Page 324. Harry's in divination, and Trelawney goes all wacko. Okay? It will happen tonight. Harry, sorry, what? The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers. The servant has been chained these 12 years. And this is book 3. Harry's 11, 12, 13. So Harry's 13. The servant has been chained for 12 years. So when Harry was 1 year old, whoever the servant was chained. Okay? The servant has been chained these 12 years. Tonight before midnight, the servant will break free, set out to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord will rise again with the servant's aid, greater, more terrible than before. It rewinds and, starts to play again. Okay? Skip a bunch again. Harry gets the note from Hagrid. Buckbeak lost his appeal. Is going to be, killed and such. And he goes down to talk to Hagrid. Okay? While there, Cat, Rat, and Dog. Ron gets carried off by the dog. They go into the Whomping Willow. They come out of the Whomping Willow. And who does Harry discover? Who's in the Whomping Willow? Well, sorry. Who's in the Shrieking Shack? Which is... Sirius Black. Who else shows up first? Remus J. Lupin. Okay. Where's Ron? Because Ron goes through first. Okay. In the corner. Yeah, he's on a bed, lying down because he's got a broken leg. Happened. They get through, and we're told, like I said, I'm going to do this real quickly. Page 339, 338, 338, Ron tells Harry he's the dog, he's an animagus. Sirius Black says, I thought you'd come and help your friend. Ron, if you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too. I don't want to kill you, you'll damage that leg even more. What does that tell us right there? You want to lie down, you'll damage that leg even more.
He doesn't want Ron to be...
He doesn't want Ron to be in pain. He doesn't want Ron. Boy, I cannot say those words. He does not want Ron to hurt himself even more, okay? Ron says, you're going to have to kill us all. Black, there'll be only one murder here tonight. Harry, why? Didn't finish the job last time. You didn't, care about killing muggles before. What's the story? What have they been told?
Sirius is the one that gave out the Godric's Hollow and then blew up Pettigrew, killing 12 muggles.
Right. Sirius betrayed Harry's parents, gave away their location to Voldemort, and then when he was cornered, he killed 12 muggles and Peter Pettigrew at the same time. Okay? Hermione's like, Harry, quiet. You're going to make the psychopathic killer go. He killed my mom and dad, Harry says. He had forgotten about magic, forgot he was short and skinny in 13, page 340. Whereas Black was a tall, full-grown man. All Harry knew was that he wanted to hurt Black as badly as he could. Okay? And so Harry's, Black kind of breaks free. And they overpower Sirius. They get their wands back. And Harry walks close to him, points his wand at Black's heart, and Black says, gonna kill me, Harry? Page 341. You killed my parents. Now, if this was an Egg Montoya, he would then say, prepare to die. But he doesn't, because this is the Princess Bride. Black stares up. I don't deny it. I don't deny it. But if you knew the whole story, You sold him to Volt. He goes, no. You'll regret it. Okay? So, you're annoyed. Hermione says, we're up here. Up comes Lupin, and Lupin Expelliarmuses them. He takes their wands away from them. Okay? Where is he, Sirius? Where's who? Hermione, I don't believe it. You're working in cahoots. And notice she says three things, and Lupin goes, you're not up to your normal, 1 out of 3, Hermione. Okay. Page 345. She says, he's a werewolf. How do we know he's a werewolf?
Snape's teaching.
Snape's teaching? What do you mean?
Whenever Snape took over, he did the werewolf.
Whenever Snape took over, he made them write an essay on how to identify a werewolf kind of thing. What else? Once a month, Sirius Black falls ill. Okay? And Snape makes the Wolfsbane potion.
Lupin turns ill?
Yeah, Lupin, turns ill. Okay? Notice, by the way, when Lupin comes back from one of his illnesses, when Snape is teacher, what does Lupin have them write?
Vampires.
It's another one of her little, breadcrumbs to make us think that Snape is a vampire. Okay? So, Lupin explains, they all know that I have it, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So, Lupin explains about the map. The map showed him Sirius Black. The map showed him Sirius Black taking Ron to the Whomping Willow, disappearing, etc., etc. And it also showed what?
It also showed Peter Pettigrew, but why didn't it not show Peter before?
Before when?
Whenever they had the map before. Like,
it's good.
Say for instance, Fred and George are like, hey, why is there Peter always sleeping with Ron?
It's an interesting question. What might be the answer?
The only one I could think of was that it can't distinguish if somebody's converted into an animagus.
No, because when Lupin sees it, it's Peter in his animagus form.
Because Lupin can see her and it doesn't he says it doesn't work. It can distinguish.
Okay. Or Occam's razor says the best solution is the easiest solution.
She forgot.
Yeah, poor writing. It's just a hole. Okay? I mean, to me, that's the easiest solution. It doesn't, she doesn't, you could say, because they don't look closely. I mean, they're using, how are Fred and George using the map? Is it to look in Ron's dormitory bedroom? No, that's weird. It's to find what? Secret passages out of the castle. Or out of the Hogwarts grounds, so to speak. What does Harry use it for? Same purpose. Okay? Lupin knows how it works. So, they tell Lupin and Sirius, tell the kids, Peter Scabbers is an animagus. And they're like, you're crazy. We can explain afterwards. Okay? So, takes a long time for them to finally make Peter Pettigrew reveal himself. Before we do, page 353. They talk about the Shrieking Shack, how it became haunted. Okay? That Dumbledore, page 353, became headmaster. He was sympathetic to Lupin's condition. Okay? Let him come. Planted the Whomping Willow, the whole 9 yards. And how they became, page 354, Animagi. Harry, my dad too? Lupin, yes indeed. Took them the best part of 3 years to work out how to do it. Your father and Sirius here were the cleverest students in the school. Lucky they were, because Animagus transformation can go horribly long. When did they achieve the ability to become Animagi?
4th year?
We're Cole, 5th year. Took them 3 years. So they started in their 2nd year. Or 3rd, possibly. About the age they are now. All right? This is going to be important for the next book. Because in the next book, Sirius is going to say to Harry, Ron, and Hermione in a key scene, you wouldn't understand, you're too young. And Ron's like, I'm so tired of hearing that. Try us, why don't you? And he kind of gets this grin, this devilish, serious grin on his face, and goes, okay. Okay, we'll play that game. You fancy yourselves as the Marauders, reborn? Fine, we'll go with that. All right? So, they keep talking, and they make Peter show himself. But only after Snape shows up. Harry yells at Snape, calls him a fool, calls him pathetic, page 361. And Harry, Ron, and Hermione all blast Snape with Expelliarmus. Why is that significant? What kind of offense is that? Probably an expelling one, right? I mean, they use a spell on a teacher. Lupin doesn't care, So, Lupin says, thanks, Harry, I don't say I might believe in you, so they make him transform. Right? And bottom of 366. Sirius, Remus, etc., etc. Page 368. They keep talking to Pettigrew. Pettigrew's, I don't know what you're talking about. Black. Exact middle of the page. You haven't been hiding from me for 12 years. Okay? You've been hiding from Voldemort's supporters. So who is Trelawney's prediction about? Is it about Peter Pettigrew being chained for these 12 years? Or is it about somebody else? Book 4. I must admit, Peter, I have difficulty in understanding why an innocent man would want to spend 12 years as a rat. Okay? So they keep talking. We're going to skip a bunch. And Sirius says, in response to Peter's, why would I have done this? Why would I have helped Voldemort? Because you never did anything for anyone unless you could see what was in it for you. Voldemort's been in hiding for 15 years. Okay, Harry's 13. So he's saying Voldemort went into hiding. If we go 13 minus 15, that's minus 2 years. That's 2 years before Harry was born. All right? Sirius says Voldemort went into hiding. So he went into hiding at the very height of his powers, Sirius is suggesting. Or is it an error? A mere mathematical error. Because when are we told Voldemort really does go into hiding? Louder?
12 years.
When? Well, he kind of goes into hiding definitely when he doesn't kill Harry. That's not a choice on his part. Okay. So, Voldemort's been in hiding 15 years. They say he's half dead. You weren't about to commit murder right now. Excuse me. They ask Lupin, they ask Sirius, how did you not go crazy in Azkaban? 371. I don't know. All I know is I was innocent. Okay? I was innocent. He was innocent and in Azkaban for 12 years. What do the Dementors feed on?
Happiness.
Happy thoughts. Knowing he was innocent, wasn't a happy thought, was it? That is, they couldn't take that away from him. Okay? So, Lupin and Black forgive each other. Why? Because each thought the other had betrayed the Potters. 374 to 375. We're almost done with what we're going to do here. Sirius, Sirius, what could I have done? Peter Pettigrew says, the Dark Lord, you have no idea. He has weapons you can't imagine. I was scared, Sirius. I was never brave like you and Remus and James. I never meant it to happen. He who must not be named forced me. Black, don't lie. You've been passing information to him for a year before Lily and James died. Okay? So, add a year onto that for the year before. Because Harry was a year old. So, a year before, take that back. That is that period. That's when he started passing information. Okay?
Probably when he got the prophecy.
Possibly. Okay? I don't want to say too much. So, what was there to be gained by refusing him? Pettigrew asks. Top of 375. Sirius Black. What was there to be gained by fighting the most evil wizard who has ever existed? Only innocent lives. Peter, you don't understand. He would have killed me. Then you should have died. That's kind of harsh. You should have died. Died rather than betray your friends, as we would have done for you. What's he suggesting? You should have died. How? I mean, I'm going to suggest, if I haven't mentioned it already, I think all 7 books are about one main idea. How to die well. How to properly die. In other words, you can die poorly. Drug overdose would be an example of a poor death. Or you can die kicking and screaming against death. Dying well doesn't mean, death. Dying well doesn't mean, it means not merely an acceptance of death. It means something more than that, which we'll talk about later. Lupin, and you should have realized, if Voldemort didn't kill you, we would. All right? But Harry stops him. Because he doesn't think his father would have wanted them to become killers on his behalf. Okay? So, jump to the end of this very quickly. Skipping all the stuff about, Snape and the Expecto Patronum, Harry's Patronus, and all that kind of stuff. Harry gets his debriefing with Dumbledore. Page 424, 425. And Dumbledore says, why so miserable, Harry? You should be very proud of yourself after last night. Right? Why? His godfather is still alive. He's still alive and, safe. Peter Pettigrew's kind of been exposed. Kind of. Harry, it didn't make any difference. Pettigrew got away. Dumbledore, it made all the difference in the world, Harry. You helped uncover the truth. You saved an innocent man from a terrible fate. What was the terrible fate? Dementor's kiss. What does the Dementor's kiss do?
Sucks out the soul.
And leaves you what?
Catatonic.
Leaves you catatonic, vegetative state. Okay? Bear in mind, Dementor. Notice she makes that word. She creates that word. She doesn't create this word, demented. That's a word that's been used in the English language for at least 100 years. But she creates this one. And she creates it from what word? Mentor. All of you have a mentor of sorts. It might be a pro forma mentor like your major advisor. Person who helps you, make sure you fill out the right paperwork, blah, blah, blah. It might be somebody you look up to for guidance, assistance, etc., etc. What do those people do? They or that ending indicates an agent of your ment or mens, your thought, your mind. It is a person who helps build you up, support you, guide you, direct you, etc. And then you get the D added on it, and it negates that. It's someone who takes away from your mind, your soul, who stops the progress, who stops the growth. Okay? And how, by the way, how does Rowling, counteract the effect of a Dementor? What does Lupin give them on the train? Why? What's the physiological reason for doing that? What does chocolate release? Endorphins, dopamine. Okay? I mean, this is a known physiological response. There's a reason she's doing all this. J.K. Rowling fought, I think still does, she's talked about, depression, largely caused by the death of her mother when she was only 22. Her mother was 45, died of cancer. Which we'll figure in kind of later. So, Harry says, page 426, but I stopped Sirius and Professor Lupin from killing Pettigrew because he remembers the prophecy and he tells Dumbledore about it. And he says, I think she might have been right. Who'd have thought? That brings your total of real predictions up to 2. Harry, but what? It makes it my fault if Voldemort comes back. It does not. Hasn't your experience with the Time Turner taught you anything, Harry? The consequences of our actions are always so complicated, so diverse, that predicting the future is a very difficult business indeed. Professor Trelawney, bless her, is living proof of that. You did a very noble thing. But Pettigrew owes his life to you. You have sent Voldemort a deputy who is in your debt. When one wizard saves another, it creates a certain bond between them. And if this were C.S. Lewis writing, he would probably say something about magic before the dawn of time. Kind of like in The Magician's Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'm much mistaken if Voldemort wants his servant in the debt of Harry Potter. I don't want a connection with him. He says this is magic at its deepest, its most impenetrable. There's only one kind of magic in these novels that we are told is impenetrable, unknowable. There's a room of it in the Ministry for Magic, whose door, in a book 5, we're going to be told is always kept locked. It's in the Department of Mysteries. These are mysteries that they tried to resolve. This is one that they don't. Interestingly enough. Right? The time may come when you will be very glad you saved. And then he says, and your father would have too. All right? So, leave that book and go to this book. So your father would have saved Pettigrew. Why are we told? Why did Snape hate Lupin and Black so much? Or let me rephrase it. Why did he hate Harry's father so much?
He saved Snape.
He saved Snape's life. Who, practical joke, tried to kill Snape? Black. Oh, you saw where Lupin went. He went in the lump. Go ahead, go try. Because the willow would take him out, and James stopped him. Okay? So, this book opens. How does this book open? Where does it open? Let me put it that way. At the Riddle House. Where do books 1 through 3 open? Number 4, Privet Drive, at the Dursley's house. Where does number 5 open? Number 5, Privet Drive. Number 4, Privet Drive. Where does number 6 open? Number 6 doesn't. Sorry. And 7 doesn't. So this one breaks the formula. One of the criticisms leveled about these books after the first few were published is that, it's just formulaic fiction. It's like a modern romance novel. Okay? Which, if you have a tip sheet, which is the kind of guidelines romance authors are supposed to follow, I mean like Harlequin romance, that kind of stuff. You know, if you have the tip sheet, you know exactly what the story's going to be about because they're all the same. All you do is change the characters and the situations. But the rest of it's all the same, you know. Books 1 through 3 all begin, number 4, Privet Drive. Number 4 changes that radically. Okay? Books 1 through 3, we don't see anybody physically die. See, we don't see Quirrell die in the first book. All right? He just disappears. This one, we see a death. And it's a pretty powerful death. It's not long, drawn out, built up, but it's pretty powerful. We've kind of come to a respect for this character. Book 5, we get a more powerful death. Book 6, a more powerful death. Book 7, a whole bunch of people are dead. I mean, she's gone all Shakespearean tragedy and just littered the stage with bodies. Why? Well, because in a sense, these are modern fairy tales. And there's always an element of danger and death in fairy tales. You know, what if Sleeping Beauty isn't kissed? She's going to ultimately die and such. So, the Riddle House. And what do we see in the Riddle House? What happens? Briefly. We see this old guy named Frank Bryce see something going on up at the house. He's the caretaker. He sees light in the windows. He thinks neighborhood kids are up there vandalizing. They've got a fire going. So he's going to go up there and read them the riot act. He goes up, and what does he see instead? He sees this short, chubby, baldish guy. He hears a voice, a high, thin voice. And the high, thin voice, talks to him. He doesn't see who's speaking. All right? I'm skipping a bunch that I'm going to come back to. And he finally hears the voice address him, and the voice says, Avada Kedavra. And there's a little wand, and Frank Bryce is killed. Now back up. Who's Voldemort talking with?
Barty Crouch Jr. and Pettigrew.
Nope. One of those is right. Pettigrew. Is Barty Crouch Jr. in this scene? No, not. Okay. Pettigrew is, and what are they talking about? Loosely, in kind of generic terms. Because she doesn't spell it out clearly for us at the very beginning. There's some kind of plot about Harry, right? Well, we knew that kind of in book 2. Different plot, all right? Look at the language that's used. Page 8. So Frank's listening to this. He's standing outside the door, and he's eavesdropping. Notice, little subtext mission lesson. Eavesdropping's not good, folks. Gets you in trouble. It could be done without Harry Potter, my lord. Pettigrew says. Without Harry Potter, I see. I do not say this out of concern for the boy. The boy is nothing to me, nothing at all. It's merely if we wanted to use another witch or wizard, any wizard, the thing could be done so much more quickly. I mean, I could leave you, I could find one, I could come right back. I could use another wizard. Yeah, that's true. It makes sense. Page 9. Then look at what Pettigrew says. Look at the language that he uses. laying hands on Harry Potter would be so difficult. He is so well protected. Why does he say laying hands on and not just kidnapping, capturing, taking? What kind of language is this? It's an L. Laying hands on. Maybe you're not in a religious tradition that uses it. In a lot of versions, let's say of Christianity, that's religious language. The laying on of hands is a healing element. That's what James talks about in the book of James in the New Testament. If you're ill, call a bunch of deacons and elders and have them come lay hands and oil and anoint and the whole 9 yards. Okay? Why is this significant? Because we're going to hear this kind of religious language later in here, also in book 5, more in book 6, and even more in book 7. In fact, in book 7, the language that's going to be used is the language of conversion. Once so-and-so is converted to our cause, the language is used. We don't tend to use the language of conversion for like switching political orientation. If a Democrat becomes a Republican, we don't talk about that as being they've converted. Unless you're a Republican, you say they saw the light, Or a Republican becoming a Democrat, they converted. Usually, in the language today, it's, they become a traitor to the party. The recent stuff about Kirsten Sinema. I mean, she's a traitor to the left, all this kind of stuff. We don't use that kind of language. Why? Because that's an ideological change. It's not a religious belief, spiritual kind of change. Conversion involves a changing of the heart, not a changing of ideas. And so, you volunteer to go and find me another witch or wizard, right? Work too. That's what you want to do? Could this suggestion of abandoning the plan be nothing more than an attempt to desert me? No, I would never. Do not lie to me. I can always tell Wormtail. He's going to use, Voldemort, is going to use that kind of language a lot. I always know. I always know the truth. Except when he doesn't. Key in book 7. Okay? Really key in book 7. No, my devotion to your lordship is nothing more than cowardice. What's the difference between devotion and cowardice? One is fear, one is love. You would not be here if you had anywhere else to go. How am I to survive without you when I need feeding, etc., etc.? What, by the way, what form does Voldemort take here? Describe him physically. Kind of like almost a baby. It's never concretely described. Okay? Here's a question. Where did he get the wand? It's his wand. Where's it been? Did just before he tried to curse Harry Potter in the first book, did he go, and as soon as I do this curse, if something happens to me, my wand will go? No. Who was apparently, at least we're led to believe this, who was the first one at the Potter house after James and Lily were killed? Okay, my mind is blanking out then. Where are we told that? Without giving anything away, is that in the memory? I don't think it is.
I think at the end.
Okay. I'm going to have to look that up. I was going to say Sirius. Sorry, Hagrid. Hagrid and Sirius. Hagrid and Sirius meet there. Hagrid takes Harry on Sirius's motorbike. Okay? Oh, and this is what I was going to get to with this. So I was, let me back up for a minute. I was talking about, book 4 breaks the pattern, right? Okay? What else does it do? You could kind of say, books 1 through 3 point to book 4. Books 5 through 7 flow from book 4. Book 4, this is not a good example to use because it's totally shot. Book 4 is kind of like the binding between the first half and the second half, or like a hinge in a door, okay? Part of what that means is what you have in the construction of the novels, you have a envelope, or another way of putting it is a ring structure, okay? Book 1 to book 7. Book 2 to book 6. Book 3 to book 5. In other words, you get parallel events. Book 1, just do this for a second. How does book 1 open? I don't mean number 4 Privet Drive. I mean, what happens to Harry?
Fleeing to Privet Drive.
He's brought to number 4 Privet Drive by Hagrid on a motorbike. Give away something. Book 7, how does it begin? Harry leaves number 4 Privet Drive with Hagrid on a motorcycle. I don't want to say anything else yet about what happens there. Okay? And then book 2 has parallels with book 5, with book 6. Book 3 has parallels with book 5. 4 kind of doesn't. It's in a sense, it's kind of self-contained, but only in the sense that these 3 books build to it, and these, it's almost, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is kind of, not literally, obviously, the climax. Because something happens here that all of this now makes sense. In fact, we're going to see Dumbledore is going to get a look in his eyes, and he's kind of going to go, gotcha. That's one way of reading it. When the book came out, the way a lot of people read this one scene, which we'll talk about later, probably not today, definitely not today. This one scene, a lot of people read as Dumbledore giving an indication of possibly being in cahoots with Voldemort. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, online discussion lists at the time. So, why does Wormtail say they don't need Harry Potter?
Return the favor.
Okay, could be that. Dumbledore said, he's got a connection with him. Okay. Why else? What do they need? For
The blood of an enemy.
Yeah, the blood of an enemy. I was going to say, without giving too much away, they need the blood of an enemy, right? Name. Almost all wizards are enemies. Who could you not use? You couldn't use Malfoy, obviously. But there's an awful lot of just everyday, ordinary wizards or witches that could be used because they're against Voldemort. So, Frank Rice gets killed. Harry wakes up. His scar is hurting. He's remembering slightly about the dream. Voldemort's talking. Pettigrew was there. An old guy got killed. So what does Harry think he should do? Yes, I know. You're wanting to call me about my surgery. You'll have to wait. Stop. Wait. So what does Harry decide to do? He sends off a letter. He writes to Hermione, right? No. He plays in his mind. Let's see, okay. My scar hurt. I had this dream. What would Ron say? Dude, that's not good. You know, you ought to write to Dumbledore. What does Hermione say? Let me go look at a book. He thinks she'll say. Can't do that. What am I going to say to Dumbledore if I write to Dumbledore? Sir, my scar hurt. That sounds lame. So he thinks he's going to write to Sirius. Because what would Sirius do? How would Sirius respond? Harry thinks. First, he'd take it seriously. Okay, yeah, a little pun. So he does write to Sirius. And next chapter, we get the invitation. How does the invitation from the Weasleys arrive? Letter, envelope, probably like something like a 9x11 envelope, entirely covered in stamps, with like a little 1 square inch to fit the addressing. How do the Dursleys respond? What does this show, by the way?
That the Weasleys and other wizards are completely out of touch with how Muggles live.
Opening paragraph, first book. The Dursleys are perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They hold to nothing strange or mysterious. Okay, so this letter might not be mysterious, but it is definitely strange. What kind of idiot would totally cover the envelope in stamps, right? So, they say, we're going to come get Harry. It's written by Molly. And Harry kind of argues with Vernon. How does Harry have newfound, what do we want to call it? Respect from Vernon? How come Vernon doesn't threaten him anymore? What happened at the very end of the previous book? Did somebody kind of threaten Vernon? What did Harry suggest?
His godfather was a murderer.
Yeah. Hey, I found my godfather. I don't need you to sign my Hogsmeade form. And, he just happens to be that escaped mass murderer. And he's going to keep tabs on me. So Vernon knows to back off a bit. So he gets letters from Ron and Hagrid and Hermione. Pages 42, 43. The Dursleys show up. The Weasleys show up. Which Weasleys?
Fred, George, and Ron.
Fred, George, Ron, and Mr. Weasley. Okay? How do they show up? Flying Fort Anglia? No. Do they apparate? No. Could they?
Well, at least they drove a car.
Not this
Pretty
time.
normal.
Yeah, they did. No, they use flue power. What's the problem? The Dursleys have modernized their home. They no longer use the coal-burning fireplace. So that fireplace has been walled over. It hasn't been removed. See, if it had been removed, then it would no longer be on the Flue network. But it's just that plasterboard put over it. So the Flue network sees a fireplace with a flue. Okay? And they show up and they're encased in the wall. Which is kind of weird because this is telling us this wall is probably a good 12 to 16 inches thick in order for them to be able to, show up inside it. But again, it's fireplace. Okay? So Mr. Weasley blasts the wall out and 44, 45. Mr. Weasley says, bottom of the page. Notice, Vernon is standing there, his best suit covered in white dust, which had settled in his hair and mustache, made him look as though he had aged 30 years. Sorry about that, said Mr. Weasley. Didn't occur to me we wouldn't be able to get to you. I had your fireplace connected to the flue, blah, blah, blah. He said, don't worry, I can put it right in a jiffy. I'll light a fire, send the boys back, then I can repair your fireplace before I disapparate. Okay? So Mr. Weasley says hello to Harry. There's some chit-chat. They go and get Harry's stuff. And the others leave, 47, 48. So now it's Harry and Mr. Weasley. After Fred or George, can't remember which, had, dropped a couple of the toffees, Mr. Weasley says, page 48. Now, sorry, Harry. By then, they didn't say anything at all. Harry moved toward the fire, but just as he reached the edge of the hearth, Mr. Weasley put out a hand and held him back. So he reaches out, grabs him by the shoulder, I think, just kind of holds him. And he looks at the Dursleys in amazement. Harry said goodbye to you. Didn't you hear him? Harry, it doesn't matter. Honestly, I don't care. Notice, we're told he mutters this to Mr. Weasley, kind of like in his ear, maybe. I think it's meant so that the Dursleys don't hear that. Mr. Weasley did not remove his hand from Harry's shoulder. In other words, no go, Harry. Not good enough. You aren't going to see your nephew till next summer, he said to Uncle Vernon in mild indignation. Now, how do you convey mild indignation? You're not going to see your nephew until next summer. Surely you're going to say goodbye. What does the surely mean? You will say goodbye. Okay? Uncle Vernon's face worked furiously. And I kind of think that means he's trying to... The idea of being taught consideration by a man who had just blasted away half his living room wall seemed to be causing him intense suffering. What does that mean, to be taught consideration? Because consideration is a noun. Show consideration, like for something.
Show someone how to be polite.
Bingo.
Teach your manners.
Teaching him manners. Vernon's like, who the hell are you to teach me manners when you blew up my living room? But Mr. Weasley's wand was still in his hand. And Uncle Vernon's tiny eyes darted to it once before he said, goodbye then. Harry, see you. Okay. And Dudley starts to gag. Mr. Weasley says, don't worry, I can sort him out. Chapter 5, we find out about Fred and George Weasley's wizard wheezes. He runs into Percy. Percy is now working at the ministry for a guy named Barty Crouch, and he, apparently loves Barty Crouch, etc., because he sucks up to him so much. Chapter 6. We can skip the rest of it. Portkey. Right? Percy is now apparating just fine. Find out about people being splinched. And they're going to take a portkey to go to the Quidditch World Cup. Page 72 is where we'll pick up. So, they meet up with the Diggories. Amos asks a question about how their trip was. Mr. Weasley says, not bad. Amos says, had to get up at 2, didn't we? Said, I tell you, I'll be glad when he, blah, blah, blah. And then Amos Diggory looks at the others. Merlin's beard. Harry? Harry Potter? Yeah. Harry's used to people looking at him like this. Sed's talked about you, of course, said Amos. Told us all about playing against you last year. Okay, so remind me what happened in the Quidditch match where Sed played against Harry. Remember what happened?
Harry fainted and fell from the Dementors.
Harry fainted because of the Dementors. fell to the ground. So who won? Hufflepuff. What happened to Harry's broom? Smashed into bits, the whole 9 yards. So, what did Ced try to do after Cedric? He thinks what should have happened in that Quidditch match.
Should have been turned over.
It should have been, disqualified, should have counted, they should have replayed it because it wasn't fair, right? Ced's talked about you, of course, told us all about playing against you last year. I said to him, Ced, that'll be something to tell your grandchildren. That will. You beat Harry Potter. Harry couldn't think of any reply, so he remained silent. Fred and George are scowling. Cedric looked slightly embarrassed. Harry fell off his broom, Dad. I told you, it was an accident. Yeah, but you didn't fall off, did you? Son, He just left off that one word. Always modest, Our said. Always the gentleman. But the best man won, I'm sure Harry would say. Wouldn't you? One falls off his broom, one stays on. Don't need to be a genius to tell which one's the better flyer. No, you just need to go through the first part of the Triwizard Tournament. And what do we hear? From Ludo Bagman. Great Scott, he can fly. Have you seen that, Mr. Crumb? That's Ludo, the famous player for, the English national team, saying, Harry, a punk, 14-year-old kid, can fly like nobody else. Okay? Just a little bit. So we see them go to the Quidditch World Cup. We get Bagman and Crouch. You think there's any accident that she names Ludo Bagman? What's Ludo doing? Both on this occasion, Quidditch World Cup, and then later on with the Triwizard Tournament. What is he doing that got Pete Rose banned forever, for example, from the Baseball Hall of Fame? Betting. He's betting on it. Okay? And you could probably even say he might even be trying to throw, in terms of the Quidditch World Cup. Because what does he kind of keep giving Harry? Clues and hints and such. Okay? So, we meet Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch. Let's see here. Senior, page 81, we see little Kevin taking Daddy's wand and making the slugs grow and shrink and such. Right? We hear about Victor Crumb. Saw something the other day with an actor, I can't remember who it was, who would have made just perfect Victor Crumb. Wish I could remember what that was. Let's see. Quidditch World Cup, and we're not going to talk about the cup itself. Page 98. Harry gets up to a seat, and there's a house elf sitting next to him. Who does it look like? Looks like Dobby. Okay? Bottom of 97. Middle 97. Dobby? Tiny creature looked up, stretched his finger. Did Sir just call me Dobby? Sorry, Harry said. Just thought you were someone I knew. But I knew Dobby too, sir. Etc., etc. Harry discovers this house elf is named Winky. Okay? You assured Harry Potter. Yes, I am. Dobby talks with you all the time, sir. How is he? How's freedom suiting him? When did Dobby get his freedom? End of Chamber of Secrets. So what happened to Dobby between Chamber of Secrets and this book? What's he been doing for the last year? We don't know. We don't see him. Okay? Oh, sir, mean no disrespect, sir, but I was not sure you did Dobby a favor, sir, when you were setting him free. Harry, why? What's wrong? He can't get another position. He has ideas above his station. Notice the language. Ideas above his station. Very particularly and peculiarly British, but what does it mean? This is where you're born.
Classes do not have any type of upward mobility.
Exactly.
and especially with servant classes, you will always be a servant. And
What?
if you weren't a servant, you wouldn't know what to do.
100% right. If you ever saw the film Knight's Tale, okay, with Heath Ledger as William Thatcher, his last name gave everything away. He was a Thatcher. His father before him was a Thatcher. His father before him was a Thatcher. They would never amount to more than Thatchers. They will always be lower class or possibly lower middle class. And yet, what is he told? Set your sights on the stars. Change your stars, meaning change your astrological controls, so to speak. And he becomes a knight, right? I mean, it's part of the knight's fantasy. Here, Winky says, Dobby has ideas above his station. He's saying his station is what? Servitude. Slavery. Okay? That's why Hermione's going to come up with spew. That's how it should be pronounced, by the way. Like, okay? SPEW. Society for the Protection of Elvish Welfare. You've got 100 of these societies in Britain. Society for the Protection of the SPCA, Cruelty to Animals. Society for the Protection of Christian Values. Society for the Protection of, etc., etc. Okay? Say that again? Societies.
Society for the Protection of Protective Societies.
Yeah. So, Harry, why can't he get another position? He wants to be paid. And Harry's like, so? He should be paid. House officer's not paid, sir. And he goes on, she goes on, whatever. Harry finds out Winky doesn't like heights, but Winky's being made to sit where?
In the box office.
Highest seat in the stadium. Showing us Winky's master sounds kind of like who? The Malfoys. You know? And then come the Malfoys. 100, 102. Pale boy, pointed face, white blonde hair. Draco greatly resembled his father. Why white blonde hair? Why pale faced?
Portray Aryan.
These are Aryan peoples. These are Nordic, very Nazi-esque ideal. Which, by the way, who is the great proponent of this Aryan ideology? Hitler, right? Describe Hitler.
Dark hair, dark eyes.
Non-Aryan. Almost the exact opposite. Yeah, he wasn't tall, and he didn't look like Dolph Lundgren. Look up Dolph Lundgren on Google, and you'll get the idea. He was relatively short, dark hair, dark eyes, and yet he also was, I don't go into the whole, he had 128, he was part Jewish. Voldemort is what? Not pure blood, okay? So, and we get the mother too. His mother was blonde too, tall and slim. She would have been nice looking if she had been wearing a look that suggested there was a nasty smell under her nose. Well, that's going to come up later. Harry's going to use that kind of comment to Draco to really get Draco angry. He's going to say, yeah, well, you remember your mom, does she always look that way, or is it just when you're around her, kind of a thing? Okay? So we have Fudge suck up to the Malfoys. We get Malfoy and Arthur back and forth a little bit. We get the Quidditch World Cup. We get descriptions of Crumb. Chapter 9, Dark Mark. All right? Let's see here. Pages 118, 119. Page 119. Crowd of wizards, tightly packed, moving together with wands pointing straight upward, was marching slowly across the field. Harry squinted at them. They didn't seem to have faces. Then he realized their heads were hooded and their faces masked. High above them, floating along in midair, 4 struggling figures were being contorted into grotesque shapes. 2 of the figures were very small. More wizards are joining the group, laughing, pointing up at the floating bodies. Tents crumpled and fell as the group moved into them. Floating people are suddenly illuminated. And Harry recognizes the Roberts family. Campsite manager, his wife, and children. He sees Mrs. Roberts turned upside down so her nightdress falls, and we see her quote-unquote voluminous drawers, her underwear. Ron, that's sick. Watching the smallest muggle child, who had begun to spin like a top. That is really sick. Hermione and Ginny come running towards them. Mr. Weasley says, we're going to go help the ministry. You kids, stay safe, stay out of, So, page 121. Harry, Ron, and Hermione go off, and Ron trips. And he says, tripped over a tree root. Well, with feet that size, hard not to. Notice I kind of put a southern draw on it. It said a drawling voice. Malfoy is there. Okay? Draco Malfoy. And Malfoy says, page 122, Granger, they're after muggles. You don't want to be showing off your knickers in midair. Because if you do, hang around, notice the little pun, they're moving this way, it would give us all a laugh. Hermione's a witch. Have it your own way, Potter. If you think they can't spot a mudblood, there it is again, stay where you are. Okay? So, they go off into the woods. Skip a bunch. They see Ludo Bagman. Pages 128, 29. They get in a little clearing in the woods. Here he hears something, says, hello? There is silence. He gets to his feet, peers around the tree, too dark to see. Who's there? And then without warning, the silence was rent by a voice unlike any they had heard in the wood. And it uttered not a panicked shout, but what sounded like a spell. Mors Mordre. Something vast greens erupted up above. What the, says Ron. For a split second, Harry thought it was another leprechaun thing. He yells, here, who's there again? Hermione says, let's move. It's the Dark Mark. You know whose magic, or sign, page 129. Voldemort's? Harry, come on. Okay. Harry turned. Ron was hurriedly scooping up his miniature crumb. The 3 of them started across the clearing, and they hear this. Harry whirled around, and in an instant he registered one fact. Each of these wizards had his wand out, and every wand was pointing right at himself, Ron, and Hermione. And he yells, duck! And notice, he doesn't just yell duck and drop. He yelled duck and seized the other 2 and pulled them onto the ground. Okay. Why? This is reinforcing something about Harry's nature. He's protecting them. Okay? We're going to be told later, Harry's going to be referred to later, book 5, as Patronus Potter. Okay? We know what a Patronus is, right? What's the spell? Expecto Patronum. What's expecto mean? I mean, you can kind of take it literally. It's a form of Latin. It's not literal Latin. The O means I, like amo means I love. Okay? Expecto, I expect. What does expect mean? I suppose, I think this is about to happen kind of thing. Literally, however, X means out of, pectoralis, out of the chest, out of the heart, possibly. I, what? A patron. What's another word for patron? You know, you have patrons of the arts. They don't protect the arts. Well, in one sense, they kind of do. They support the arts, right? They write checks. What else? A patron saint. What's a patron saint supposedly for? Protection. Okay? A patron is a protector, a deliverer, a savior. So, out of the heart, a savior, protector, because the patronus is the individual's protector, savior, etc., etc. Patronus, Potter, protector, deliverer, savior, Potter. Book 5 is where that comes. So, but we see Harry doing that from book 1 on, right? He goes into the Forbidden Forest with Malfoy. He puts his arm out. Even before then, his first flying lesson, what does he do?
Stands up to Malfoy or Neville.
He protects Neville. He protects Neville's honor. Not Neville personally, because Neville's already broken his arm and been taken off. Okay? So, all these wizards are there. Harry saves Ron and Hermione. Who, when they discover Winky, who kind of suggests, implies, Winky conjured the Dark Mark. And follow that to its logical conclusion. Therefore, Winky's owner conjured the Dark Mark. Amos Diggory does. Okay? And we get on page 132. Amos says, "No point, Mr. Crouch. There's no one else there." Because Barty Crouch Sr. comes in and looks around and there's nobody there. Bit embarrassing, Diggory says. Barty Crouch's house, I mean to say. Weasley, come off it, Amos. Dark Mark's a wizard's eye. Requires a wand. Yeah, and she had a wand. What? And he holds up a wand. Okay?
Wouldn't it be suspicious to them anyway for there to be for Barty Crouch to have paid for a seat for Winky?
You would think, because Barty Crouch never showed up. Okay? Senior never showed up here. Okay? Well, take that back. He did, but he had an empty seat, except for Winky. Okay? So, Diggory again says, 133, she had a wand. They make the wand spit out its last spell. Harry says, "That's my wand," page 134. And Diggory says, "You dropped it. Is this a confession? You threw it aside after you conjured the mark?" Harry says, "That's my wand. I dropped it." You dropped it. Notice what Amos Diggory makes from "you dropped it." A confession. Talk about your logical leap. Mr. Weasley, Amos, think of who you're talking to. Is Harry Potter likely to conjure the Dark Mark? And then he kind of, no, of course not. Harry, and I didn't drop it there. I missed it after we got into the word. Okay? Winky says, "It wasn't me." How would they know if it was Winky or not? What kind of voice does Winky have? Can Winky, change her voice? We're never told anything that they can. Dobby always speaks in the same voice. Hermione says it wasn't her. Winky's got a squeaky little voice. It wasn't like that. Okay?
Also, the master could just order the truth.
Yeah, interestingly. So, page 136. Diggory says, let's use the verb Rowling uses. Diggory roars. "You've been caught red-handed, Elf, caught with the guilty wand in your hand." Arthur Weasley, Amos, think about it. Precious few wizards know how to do that spell. Where would she have learned it? Okay, I never noticed this till just now. What is that suggesting about house elves?
I they are capable of using magic.
Or they're only capable of doing magic they can learn from their masters. Right or wrong? It's wrong. It's very wrong. In fact, that leads to one of the big clues later on. House elves have magic that wizards and witches don't have. Arthur Weasley has bought into the propaganda, okay, or is part of the propaganda, that what's the natural order of things? Witches and wizards and everybody else. Okay? Perhaps Amos is suggesting, says Mr. Crouch, that I routinely teach my servants to conjure the dark mark. There's a deeply unpleasant silence. Amos, well, Mr. Crouch, not at all. What is Barty Crouch's job? He's like head of the International Olympic Commission. Big freaking deal. What power does he have over Amos Diggory? Zilch. So why is Amos Diggory so...
Wizards are very honor bound.
Okay, they're honor bound, they're prideful. What else? What do we discover about Barty Crouch later? And I don't mean anything dark, nefarious. He was tipped to be the next Wizard of Magic, Minister of Magic. All right? So, Crouch says, you have now come very close to accusing the two people in this clearing who are least likely to conjure that mark. Harry Potter and myself. I mean, everybody knows Harry's, history. We don't know Barty Crouch's history yet, do we? It's going to be told. I suppose you're familiar with the boy's story, who, of course, everyone knows, except, maybe Gilderoy Lockhart. And I trust you remember the many proofs I have given over a long career that I despise and detest the dark arts and those who practice them. Little bit of information, not much. I never suggested you had anything to do with it. If you accuse my elf, you accuse me. Where else would she have learned to conjure? She might have picked it up anywhere. Precisely, Amos, says Mr. Weasley. She might have picked it up anywhere. And he says, where did you find Harry's wand? Notice, Arthur's talking about the it as the wand. Amos is talking about the it as the spell. I was finding it there, sir, there in the trees. So whoever conjured the mark could have disapparated right after they'd done it, leaving Harry's wand behind. Clever thing to do, not using their own wand, which could have betrayed them. Okay? So, Crouch says she's going to be punished. Ron asks, top of 140, Dad, why was everyone so uptight about that skull thing? Who knew immediately what it was? Why? Because she reads. She reads everything as long as it doesn't have dirty words, mudblood. Meanwhile, Ron is raised in a house full of wizards and witches, and he doesn't have a clue. What would the dark mark be equivalent in our world? Okay. What's the problem with that equation? This predates Hitler by how many years? Literally thousands. Thousands. That's a quote-unquote a prehistoric symbol. And it's found in an awful lot of places. Right? Indo-European places, let me put it that way at least. It's found in India, it's found in Russia, it's found in Germany, before, Nazism, all that kind of stuff. It's a sun symbol that gets turned to bad use. Have you ever seen an image of a skull that's meant to suggest hope, love, beauty, romance, No! What do pirates have? Skull and crossbones. What's one of the symbols for poison? Skull and crossbones. The only thing this doesn't have is the crossbones. What does it have instead?
Snake.
A snake coming out of the mouth. That's pretty disgusting, okay? So, Hermione gets all bent out of shape because Barty Crouch is going to fire Winky. Page 142. Mr. Weasley says, in response to Ron's, again, I don't get it. It's just a shape in the sky. Ron's saying it's just an image. Right? What does Ron seem oblivious to? Why are images important?
They mean things.
Symbolism. They mean things. And we might try to say, oh, it's just an image, and say it doesn't mean anything. And yet there are some symbols that deeply resonate. Okay? Ron is unaware of that. Mr. Weasley. Ron, you know who and his followers sent the dark mark into the air whenever they killed? The terror it inspired. That's why a flag, flying this or this, spray painted on the side of a synagogue, or a Jewish school, or a Jewish home, or a Jewish cemetery, is so offensive. Okay? He says, the terror it inspired, you have no idea, you're too young. Now, I think you're too young means possibly two different things. What's one of the meanings? Immature. You're not adult enough to realize this. What else? Naive. Okay. What else? It's not been seen in Ron's lifetime until today. You're too young means you've never experienced it. It's like, and I don't care your political convictions. Have what you want. But I'll betray a little bit of mine. It's like when I hear somebody in their 20s talk about how wonderful socialism is. It's like, go live in a real socialist world and don't tell me, oh, that's not real socialism. Real socialism killed over 100 million people in the last 100 years. Well over 100. Possibly 60 million just in Soviet Russia. So there's, the whole hammer and sickle thing. That's a powerful symbol. Because if the hammer doesn't kill you, the sickle will, kind of a mentality. All right? If you don't know that, if you weren't old enough to remember, like I am, the Cold War, it wasn't good. I mean, I literally remember duck and cover, they were a lot more substantial than these, getting under the school desks because we were told the Ruskies are going to bomb us to obliteration, anytime, all right? Just picture coming home. So Arthur brings it down to the nitty-gritty. Coming home and finding the dark mark hovering over your house and knowing what you're about to find inside. This goes back to what I asked earlier about who arrived at the Potter house first and how soon. We're told when Sirius and Hagrid showed up, the dark mark was still there. They got there pretty soon. Okay? And if Snape was there before, I'm fine with that. I've got to verify that because I'm completely drawing a blank on it. Everyone's worst fear, the very worst. Silence. They talk about Death Eaters. Harry, what are Death Eaters? It's what you-know-who supporters called themselves, said Bill. I think we saw what's left of them today. In other words, there aren't many around today. Nazis, right? Mr. Weasley, we can't prove it was them, Bill. Why? Because they didn't have a little badge. Proud supporter of Death Eaters Anonymous, you know. Probably was. Ron, I bet it was. We met Draco. And he was kind of, yay. So Harry asks, top of 143. So what were you-know-who supporters up to? Levitating muggles. I mean, what was the point? What does Harry mean by what was the point?
What's the end game?
What's the end game? What's the purpose? How is this going to, let's use the language that is used all too much, all too often. How is this going to effect change? The point. Harry, that's their idea of fun. Half the Muggle killings back when you-know-who was in power were done for fun. So what's that tell us about you-know-who and his followers? They're sick.
I agree with the theory that that's why we use the word abracadabra as our common.
Could be. If I remember right, abra, and it's actually this. Cadabra. It's supposed to be a gibberish form of some kind of Arabic phrase. Don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure that's true. Just like hocus pocus is a bastardization of Latin hoc est corpus. The words of institution used in the Catholic Latin Mass when the priest elevates the host and says, "This is my body shed for you." Hoc est corpus. This is the body. And it becomes hocus pocus. Pull the rabbit out of that. Why? Because in the Middle Ages, some of the time at least, early Middle Ages, the English priests, King Alfred the Great tells us about this, they didn't know Latin. But they're reciting the Mass in Latin and probably screwing it up. And hoc est corpus becomes hocus pocus. But Avada Kedavra definitely comes from this. All right? But if they were the Death Eaters, says Ron, why'd they disapparate when they saw the Dark Mark? I mean, if Hitler's back from the dead and they see this white, Bill, use your brains. If they were really Death Eaters, Ron, what did they do to stay out of Azkaban? Notice they didn't die for the cause. What did a lot of Nazi doctors, scientists, leaders in the SS and such do when Hitler died and Germany surrendered? They fled. Adolf Eichmann was found in Brazil. Mengele was found in Brazil too, I believe. Okay? They fled and went underground and became the source of a lot of great movies and novels and spy fiction and such. We'll stop there. Okay, so I will post a lecture that hopefully begins somewhere around the Dark Mark, and we'll go up to, what did I say? Probably somewhere around Padfoot Returns, and for the third task, and then we will conclude the Thursday after fall break. Because as of right now, unless that was my doctor calling me and telling me I'm not having surgery, I'm still scheduled for surgery on Thursday.